Hati To and happy spooky month! I'm really excited to be sharing this project with you. This is more of a vlog style sew with me with a little bit of clarification and some adaptations from the last time I sewed a JSK. That video is up here, and I'm finally doing something with that fabric that I hand printed myself, and those videos are also here somewhere for you. This sewing vlog is going to be a little bit less in depth as far as the construction and the drafting of the JSK. If you want to know how to draft a princess seam bodice, I will have a tutorial linked down there for you. The last time I made a JSK, I got a little bit more in depth about like the basic construction and things like that. And this is kind of like a part 2 in a lot of ways. So if you actually want to sew a JSK, I have a whole slew of resources for you. And with that said, let's get into the video.
Now, I would always recommend that you iron your fabric. However, my iron was in a storage unit, so I had to wait still while it was being shipped to Florida. I'm sure that you all remember this fabric and why I love it.
Spoopy boy.
It was finally time to cut this out and make it into a JSK. The first step was to separate the section that was going to be my skirt. I did this by cutting the bottom like 3 feet off. That was going to be my skirt, and then that top section there is what I'm going to be cutting every other pattern piece out of. I do have one section where I continued the pattern and the print, and that is where I'm going to be cutting out the bodice. I did a quick draft of a princess seam, and I didn't do it quite correctly, but I wind up fixing all of those problems later in the video. I pattern matched really carefully, and I made sure to conserve my fabric as well as I possibly could. Like I said, I didn't print very much of this fabric in this pattern. I do still have the stencil so I can make more if need be, but for now, I'm just going to be as careful with it as I can. What you see me doing here is lining everything up to pattern match. I'm doing just a very rudimentary pattern match. I'm not breaking out the measurement tools or anything crazy like that, but I'll link a better pattern matching tutorial in the description box below. My previous tried and true princess bodice pattern is unfortunately MIA. I knew that I would need it, so I separated it from the rest of my patterns while we moved, and now I cannot find it anywhere. But that's fine. I'll just draft a new one. Once I had my side bodice pieces cut out, as well as my front bodice piece, I did the exact same thing with some unprinted fabric to be the lining. So this left me with 2 bodice fronts and 4 bodice sides, 2 for each respective side. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, I also cut out a back panel that is going to be a shirred elastic panel. And after a quick aesthetic pinning session, I was ready to take my bodice pieces over to my machine and sew them together. Unfortunately, all of these seams would need to be unpicked and redone. So I did that off camera and got my bodice pieces put together correctly, and then I went ahead and attached them along the top as you see here with a nice straight stitch. This would finish the top of my bodice and give me a nice clean edge to work with. This is essentially what I did the last time I made a JSK, except for this time I'm adding a full sheared panel in the back. This sheared panel is created by taking 2 pieces of fabric of the same size, putting them face to face, and sewing in little channels that I strung the elastic through. And then I'm going to attach it to the rest of the bodice with a French seam. This will give me a nice clean finish on the inside, while still looking neat on the outside. Anytime I sew a garment, I really like to obsess over how clean the finish will be on the inside, both because I like how it feels, and because it looks fancy. If you're watching my videos, I assume that you already know how to do a French seam, but if you do not, I will have a video linked in the description box. Now that I have my full shearing panel installed, I needed to go ahead and decide what I wanted to do with the decoration on the back. I decided to use some of the same lace trim that I'm going to use later for a few other things, but I decided to cut my lace in half lengthwise so I would only have the decorative trim on one side. This will make sense in a moment. Basically, I want to have little corset loops so that I can cinch my back in and add some decorative detail to the back, beyond of course just the shearing panel. So before putting down my decorative lace, I went ahead and I tacked down all of my little loopies that my lacing is going to go through, and I made these with the same ribbon I'm going to lace it up with. Then I pinned down my lace and my ribbon, and I tacked those down by hand. I could have done this on the machine, but I figured with all of the lumpy fabric underneath, it would be a little bit hard to get a nice straight stitch, and since this is decorative, I want it to be as pretty as possible. Honestly, hand tacking the ribbons down didn't take very long, and I wish that I would have done them by hand everywhere that I did them. Speaking of places where I used ribbon, I decided that I wanted some military Lolita buttons along the front of my shirt, and I was going to put down some black ribbons to look a little bit, like classic military style embellishments, but subtler. So I went ahead and I folded under the raw edges of some ribbon and I made 3 lines on the lower section of my bodice. Then I took this over to my machine and I top stitched all along the edges of the ribbon. And like I said, I wish that I would have done this by hand, but it's no big deal. And before sewing on my buttons, I went ahead and made my straps. Using a strip of leftover fabric, I folded the raw edges to the middle and I marked every 2 inches on one side of the fabric. I wanted my straps to be ruffly, and to do this, I was going to make box pleats and then sew those down with some decorative lace and ribbon on top. You can see here that to make my little box pleats, I'm simply folding my ribbon so that the marks I've made touch each other and then doing it in the opposite direction for the next pleat, and alternating the direction every pleat that I make to create these little boxes of pleats. This is one of those sewing things that makes a lot more sense to look at than to listen to someone talk about. This is also one of the sewing details that Lolita picked up from Rococo fashion. Fun fact. To finish off my little strappy straps, I'm going to put some lace down on top. You can see here that I'm just moving down my strap and moving the pins so that the lace is pinned down as well. And before I put down my satin ribbon, I'm going to stitch this down with a zigzag stitch to hold everything together and protect my raw edge, which is safely hidden underneath the lace. And as you can see, I am removing my pins as I go to avoid any broken needles or broken eyeballs. Once I have my lace completely sewn down, I'm going to continue by applying the pretty satin ribbon. I'm just doing a top stitch on both ends of the ribbon, being sure to sew in the same direction both times I do it, and of course doing the same process on both of my straps. Next, I was ready to pin my straps in place to get a good idea of how it was going to look, and of course, sew those buttons on. These shank buttons that I'm using have a decoration on them that has a upside and a downside, so I'm making sure that they are lined up exactly as I want them before I stitch them down, because they're very directional buttons, like I said. I wanted to do all of the bodice decoration details before attaching my skirt because it's going to be a lot harder to maneuver this JSK once the whole skirt is attached. Once I had all my buttons sewn on, I removed my straps so that I could put this little lace detail down the front. Now, I did this same design style for my last JSK, so I didn't really want to do it for this one as well, but it was going to look so nice I couldn't stop myself. I folded the raw edge of the ribbon and the lace under, and I pinned that in place, and then I followed along my princess seam line with my ribbon and my lace to create a dreamy, elegant line along my bodice. I pinky promise that the next time I make a JSK, it will be different. Now that I have all of my pretty fancy embellishments pinned down, it was time to hand sew them into place. I'm just using a basic running stitch for all of these ribbon bits, with very, very small stitches on the outside so that they aren't as obvious.
Okay, so I'm trying this on. I should have tried it on sooner probably before doing all the embellishment. I'm going to stitch the straps on by hand. I'm really happy with how it fits. Like, I think it's perfect. There's a little bit more width right here because I don't have this laced. So once that is laced, that will be handled. But no, I really like the fit. I really like the look. I think this looks like a real Lolita bodice, which is really exciting. I don't think the buttons look too cheesy, which I was afraid of. I don't think that this looks like too much detail. I was a little bit afraid it would be too much, but no, this is exactly what I was going for. And nothing went wrong.
Now, all that was really left to do was to attach the skirt and do all the finishing steps. I gathered up the top edge of my skirt and I pinned my side seam, ready to take that over to the machine. Fun fact, gathering the top edge of the skirt took forever, and that is why it's not on camera. As you can see here, my raw edges don't line up perfectly, and that is for two reasons. Firstly, I was trying to pattern match just a little bit on my skirt, and secondly, I knew this would make it easy for me to do a nice hand-felled hem afterwards. I don't know why I sew so chaotically, but I do. Anyways, once that seam was done, I went ahead and did a hand-felled hem because it'll lay nice and flat, and I could not be bothered with a French seam with all of this material to lug around. This project actually was a lot more hand sewing than I would typically do, but that's fine because I liked the results I wound up with. And of course, I will link you to a good hand-felled seam tutorial in the description box below. Next, all that was left was to turn both my pieces inside out and pin them right sides together and take it over to my machine and attach them with a nice straight stitch. After doing the first pass, I always like to go around and do a overlock with a zigzag stitch so that all my little raw edges don't slowly unravel and ruin all of my nice hard work. I did do all of my hemming and attaching the lace trim at the bottom off camera.
Kenya!
As I was saying, I did all of my hemming off camera because it was 4 yards of hem and 4 yards of running stitch to attach the lace. I did a basic hemming stitch with my teensy tiny little stitches on the outside, and for the running stitch I was really careful to only grab the folded over hem section of the fabric so that none of my stitches would show through on the outside. This project actually went relatively quickly even with all of the hand sewing. There was only one major hiccup. I ran out of lace and I had to run to Joann's to pick up another yard of it to replace this 5-inch gap here.
Oh, one more thing before we get started. I don't have any good blouses yet, so I took a bunch of stuff from my closet and I made it work, sort of. It's a little bit Ida, but I like it, whatever.
This also gave me the opportunity to think about the different styles of blouse that I would like to wear with this JSK. What I think would look nice, what I think would suit my future Lolita wardrobe, and really plan out what I want. And I really want to fix the collar on this blouse. In the hidden tomes of my closet, I also found my very, very Ida overdress that I made freshman year, and it still fits. I actually might be able to salvage this thing, but there is a lot that is going to need done to it. Maybe I'll have time for that, maybe I won't. We'll see what happens. I did put together a proper cord, and yes, did wind up wearing it to Aldi to pick up some groceries. What's that phrase? If you really love your clothes, you can find a place to wear them, even if it's just the grocery store. Well, I really, really love this JSK. Which is good, because this was a real labor of love. I think I spent a total of 6 hours on just the print of the fabric, and then maybe another 6 on the construction of the dress. I did cut a couple of corners, and I do wish that I had added a pocket, for example, but next time I can do that. Be sure to let me know in the comments what kind of custom border prints you would make for yourself. I'm planning on making a couple of print-off stencils, but we'll see when I get around to that. I've been a bit behind lately.
And speaking about me being a little bit behind lately, I am actually going to be taking the month of November off. And then in the month of December, there's going to be a very special event for you guys. I hope that you'll enjoy. I'm enjoying prepping for it. And then after December, I'm gonna resume with a regular upload schedule for you guys. So I'll be posting on my main channel where I'm gonna be doing more commentary and more loose content that you all seem to really enjoy, and then on my second channel is where I'm going to keep the strictly educational sewing content. So I'm splitting those two into 2 separate buckets because they tend to have 2 very different audiences, and very different sized audiences, unfortunately. I'll hook you with the pop culture and then get you sewing in no time. That's my model for my channels at this point. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a like so that more awesome people like you can see it. And remember, I have Ko-fi links down there. If you buy me a Ko-fi, you'll be helping me get to my goal of breaking even for all of the expenses of this channel, my other channel, and my pattern making for about the past year and into next February. Once I break even, I'm going to be releasing 2 very special free sewing patterns for y'all, which I hope that you'll enjoy. And until next time, see you later, friends!
Okay. Now, show me where the turtles are.
Turtles are over here. Wait, here's one. That's one of the big ones. You can see him chilling. And there's another one over there. There are just turtles and ducks. Unfortunately, no turtle ducks. But no, I really appreciate this guy. It's very serene.